What's up, Psychedelic Investors? My name's James, and you're watching The Psychedelic Investor, your number one news source for psychedelic stocks. Alright guys, so today we're going to be looking at a few stories that I found really interesting over the past couple of weeks. So we're going to do like a little bit of a roundup episode today. The first story that we're going to discuss is Kevin O'Leary's comments that he believes that MindMed, Atai Life Sciences, and Compass Pathways will eventually merge to create one mega corporation. So in this episode, we're going to discuss the reasoning behind why he believes this, and then we're also going to take a look at whether or not we think it's likely, and whether or not we think it's a good idea. The next story that we're going to bring to you is a brand new study that's looking at the effectiveness of antidepressants in treating, well, depression. And finally, there's this really cool story about a guy named Dustin who found that magic mushrooms actually cured his loss of smell that came from, that global disease that everybody's getting these days. So in this episode, we're going to cover all three of these stories, maybe shoot the shit a little bit, have a little bit of fun. But first, I just want to give you guys a little bit of a reminder that on May 20th to May 22nd, I'm going to be in Kingston, Ontario for Canada's premier psychedelic medicine conference. It is called the Catalyst Summit. Again, it's happening from May 20th to May 22nd. There's going to be leaders from the business community. There's going to be scientific leaders, legal leaders, so much more. I'm actually going to be hosting a panel there, and I'll, of course, be going to all the different networking events, blah, 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 blah. But if I'm not a big enough pull for y'all, first thing, I'm a little bit offended, but then the second thing, don't worry, much bigger names will be there as well, like the one and only legendary Paul Stamets, as well as one of the leaders of Field Trip Health, Ronan Levy, and so many more business leaders. So definitely make sure that we see you there. Psychedelic Spotlight's actually got you some discounted tickets. We put a link down in the pinned comment, so I hope to see you guys all there. So, hopping into the first story today. Kevin O'Leary says that he believes that MindMed, Atai Life Sciences, and Compass Pathways are eventually going to merge into one mega psychedelics company. He made these comments at the Benzinga Psychedelic Capital event in Florida about a week ago or something like that. So I guess the first thing that we should do is examine why he believes that these companies will ultimately end up merging. And it's no surprise that at the end of the day, the reason is that moolah, that money. He says that he believes that in order to survive, each of Atai, MindMed, and Compass will need an additional $200 million in order to bring their many different products to fruition past the FDA approval process. Now, for anybody watching this show, you're not surprised to learn that this process, through research and development, phase 1, 2, 3, and finally FDA approval, is mad expensive. For one drug, it can cost tens of millions of dollars upwards to $100 million. And if you're a company like MindMed or Atai Life Sciences working on like 10 different drugs, well, that adds up pretty quickly. Now, to be fair, all three of these companies do have a lot of money in the bank. MindMed, I believe, has more than 100 million. Compass Pathways has more than, I believe, 200 million. And Atai Life Sciences has more than $300 million. However, according to Kevin Leary, he does not believe that that will be sufficient. So what he is suggesting is that these three behemoths of the psychedelics landscape combine their treasure chests so that they will have $600 million to put towards whatever needs to be researched, whatever needs to be put into clinical trials, and ensure that these medicines eventually get to market. Now, thinking about whether or not this is a good idea, when it comes to the psychedelic medicine industry, because these companies are still more or less pre-revenue, basically the only way that they can raise capital is through dilution. And I don't know if y'all have checked the stock prices recently, but they ain't doing too hot. Therefore, diluting would cost a big chunk of the company in order to fund even a year. Let's take MindMed, for example. They spent like $90 million last year. Their market cap is, like $500 million right now, give or take. So a dilution to get even 1 year's worth of capital would take like 20% or thereabouts. The situation is a bit better for Compass Pathways and Atai Life Sciences, but not much better. Each company has between like 1.5 to 2 years of runway when it comes to how much cash they have in the bank. So Kevin O'Leary thinks that best thing to do is combine the companies now so that we don't have to worry about raising money again anytime in the future. We can cut costs. For example, you don't need two accountings firms for each different, or an accounting division for each individual company. When it comes to next generation R&D, there's lots of synergies that can go there. And also these companies, they really have different focuses of psychedelics. So MindMed is an expert on LSD, Compass Pathways, expert on psilocybin, Atai Life Sciences, they have lots of things, but their main or most furthest progressed psychedelic compound is R-ketamine. So this new hypothetical company would have the best of all worlds, essentially. And then, of course, they all have their next generation psychedelics working together. So when you say it like that, kind of seems like it's not a bad idea, in all honesty. However, when you take a step back and think about some of the second and third order consequences, there might be some issues that arise. So let's start with just the structure of these companies. Both Compass Pathways and MindMed are much more of a traditional biotech type company. Yes, they're dealing with wacky compounds, psychedelic compounds, but they're still more or less unitary companies, whereas Atai Life Sciences can be thought of more as a holding company or an umbrella company, to use the term that we've used a bunch. They own a bunch of different companies that are each working on their own solutions to different problems. So if MindMed were to join Atai, would MindMed just become another subsidiary of Atai? And if that's the case, I don't see how there's much cost savings there potential. Maybe MindMed and Compass could merge together, and then those both are under the umbrella of Atai. But it's just difficult to think about how this will work. Again, by the way, Atai actually does own around 20% of Compass Pathways, although they do operate as two separate companies. Now, the big stumbling block that I have seen people talk about online, or hypothetical stumbling block, is perhaps there is a difference in the patent philosophies of these two different companies when it comes to their ethical boundaries. So, rightly or wrongly, fairly or not, both Atai Life Sciences and Compass Pathways have been accused of essentially patent trolling, patenting everything they possibly can, even if it is not a just patent. For example, Compass Pathways, they've patented their Comp 360, which they believe is a new version of psilocybin, although some people say it's not a new version of psilocybin. I've tried to look into the patents myself, but I'm not a chemistry expert, and I can't make heads or tails of whether or not these are two separate versions of psilocybin. But nevertheless, the accusation stands that these two companies aren't the most ethical about what they are patenting. Again, I'm not making a judgment call on whether or not that's real, but it is an accusation that is out there. When Robert Barrow took the reins of MindMed not too long ago, he had a investor roundtable or fireside chat, and he, I think, kind of took a little dig at Compass Pathways. At least that's how I personally interpreted it. He said something along the lines of, unlike other companies, MindMed won't patent, or will only patent, true innovations. So I took that as a dig at Compass Pathways, although maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was a dig at other companies that we're not talking about. However, even that, the question of whether or not they're really far away on patents, that might just be rhetoric. As Graham Peshnick pointed out on Twitter, by the way, guys, I have a Twitter, you should definitely follow it. As Graham Peshnick pointed out on Twitter, MindMed it's attempting to get a patent to patent candy flipping, which is the procedure of combining MDMA and LSD, which obviously is something that's already existed out in the public for a generation or two. So if they were actually trying to patent that, that would obviously be no bueno. We wouldn't want that. All of which is, I'm just trying to say, guys, that there is a disagreement on whether or not these two companies would necessarily share the same moral boundaries, whether that can just be overridden with money, etc. But it is a question that I've seen in the Reddit communities before, so I thought I would mention it. Okay. So I think that I got everything that I wanted to talk about when it comes to MindMed, Atai, and Compass Pathways. Oh yeah, last thing is whether or not I want this to happen. Well, honestly, guys, I'm pretty agnostic on this. If you take a step back and analyze this from kind of a first principles approach, the number one thing that I want to see as a human being is efficacious medications getting to people that currently need help, that are not well treated by current medications. So if LSD really is something that can help treat chronic anxiety, or if psilocybin can treat treatment-resistant depression, or R-ketamine can treat another form, I think that's a major depressive disorder, whatever it is, if these drugs are effective and they're more likely to help people by these three big companies combining into one mega corporation, one mega psychedelics company, well, then I'm all for it. But on the flip side, if it's more likely that people will get helped by having three different big companies that are all competing against each other to create the best medicines, and that is the most likely path, well, then I'm all for that also. At the end of the day, I want to see as many people get helped as possible, and from an investing standpoint, it will be the best return possible if as many people as possible get helped. So that is what I am for, and I don't necessarily know which one of those two pathways is the better option, but whichever one the professionals in charge of these companies decide, I'm very happy with it. And one last thing, all of this stems from Kevin O'Leary's comments at this conference. This isn't sourced from inside these companies or anything, and as far as I know, nobody from these companies have ever mentioned this possibility before. So yes, Kevin O'Leary could be considered a quote-unquote insider, but I don't think that he was saying this necessarily because he heard anything. I think he was more just saying it because he wants to manifest the future that he wants to see, and he thinks this would be a good outcome. Moving on, our next story of the day is a brand new study was released which shows the effectiveness or lack thereof of antidepressants in treating depression. Now, right off the bat, let me just say this wasn't a clinical trial. This was a study using data that's already been collected, although there were many, many individuals that were in this study. I'm just trying to say that the results of this aren't necessarily definitive, although they can be used as one data point. So basically what this study is looking at is whether or not people who are depressed who take antidepressants get better over the course of a year. They measured three different aspects of quote-unquote getting better, and that is, 1, your mental health, 2, your physical health, and 3, this holistic catch-all category that they call overall well-being and health-related quality of life. So let's take a little bit of a look at the results. Well, they found that for people who had depression and who took antidepressants, over the course of a year, their physical health didn't get any better. I mean, that's cool, whatever, it doesn't really matter. This is a mental health care drug, wasn't supposed to make their physical health get any better. A little bit more worrying is that on the variable of overall well-being and health-related quality of life, that didn't really improve either, at least not statistically significantly. I would hope that the antidepressant pill would increase your quality of life, but apparently that's not what they saw in this survey. However, when you look at the final one, mental health, and this is a mental health care drug, so one could argue this is the most important variable, they did find that those who had depression who took an antidepressant improved their mental health. So victory, antidepressants work, I knew it. But wait. When you take a look at the people who had depression and didn't take an antidepressant, well, over that same period of time, they also improved by more or less the same amount that those who took the antidepressant did. So much so that there was no statistically significant variance between those two groups. Extrapolating from this, it doesn't look like the antidepressant did too much, guys. Now, this is important for a very specific reason. We're going to take a step back. Most people watching this are investors in psychedelics and psychedelics companies. So why are we talking about an antidepressant that is not a psychedelic? Well, let's zoom back a second and take a look at what the thesis for investing in psychedelic stocks is. So there are basically 4 pillars on which it rests, and then you extrapolating from those 4 pillars, you get the thesis. The first one is that we are in the middle of a mental health care crisis. Depression levels, all-time highs. Anxiety levels, all-time highs. PTSD levels, all-time highs. You get the picture. Point 2, current medications aren't working. That's where this study enters. Point 3, early evidence is showing that psychedelic medicines are much more efficacious than current medicines. And point 4 is that the market that psychedelics are trying to disrupt is worth tens of billions of dollars, upwards to $100 billion. Therefore, putting those 4 together, people that invest in the companies that make medicines that work better than current medicines by orders of magnitude and disrupt markets worth tens of billions of dollars are set to make a killing. So using this thesis and looking at this study, we are seeing some evidence here that current medications are not working properly. And in fact, when you take a look and you read the entire paper, the authors talk about how many other studies have shown that the positive effects of antidepressants might just be the placebo effect. People expect to get better, and therefore they do. And here, guys, I want to be clear. First of all, this is not medical advice. Listen to your doctor, first of all. So if your doctor has you on antidepressants and you see this rando dude talking about psychedelic stocks, talking about how antidepressants don't work, listen to your doctor and not him. So that's the first thing I want to say. Not medical advice. Second thing is, apparently, many of the studies that are done, and this is according to the authors in this study, many of the studies that are done on the effectiveness of antidepressants aren't published. So when you look at the published studies, you have a tendency to show that the antidepressants are effective, or more effective than the placebo. But then when you look at all the studies that aren't published, lo and behold, what is this? Antidepressants' effectiveness is the same as the placebo. Oh my God. So I didn't even realize that there were, and again, this is according to the authors in this study, that there were so many unpublished studies on the matter. They say when you look at the data from the published studies and the unpublished studies, the effectiveness of antidepressants is not really that much better than the placebo, which is kind of disturbing because we've got tens of millions of people on antidepressants, but I guess it is what it is. Although it is amazing, the placebo, the more I'm learning about psychedelics, the more I'm learning about just how amazing the placebo effect is, and how by believing something, your body can do it, which we're going to get to in a second in our next story. But that's really one of the big takeaways for me here. And by the way, this could extend to psychedelics too. I'm not saying it does, but lots of studies for microdosing, for example, say that it's basically just the placebo effect. Your brain expects amazing things to happen because you're taking your magic pill, and then amazing things happen, not because of the magic pill, but because you're magical. And on that note, let's move on to the third story. But first, just a reminder, tickets for the Catalyst conference down in the pinned comment. I want to see you all there. Alrighty, final story of the day. Can mushrooms cure your loss of sense of smell that gets from that global bug that's going around? Well, they did for Dustin. So this piece that you see here from a public broadcaster, this is legit. Dustin's a 100% a real person. He got... Damn it, I was trying not to say the word. I guess this episode's demonetized now. He got that global bug, and he lost his sense of smell, and when the bug went away, his sense of smell didn't come back, unfortunately, and he was really desperate. He was trying everything. The doctors didn't have an answer for him. They didn't know why it wasn't coming back, and he found a community on Reddit that said, magic mushrooms can help. There were all of these testimonials of people that had the same experience, and magic mushrooms brought them back their sense of smell. So Dustin, at a rope's end, obviously people had it worse than him. People end up on respirators and stuff, but still it's no bueno to lose your sense of smell. He was not okay with it, and he decided, you know what, let's do it. Let's try the magic mushrooms. He hadn't done magic mushrooms in 17 years, had no idea what to expect, but he just went all in. He got a solid amount, procured a solid amount. He took a bunch, he lied down. I think he was listening to music, and a couple hours into the experience, he had an unfortunate revelation. Man, oh man, does my BO stink right now. And then the light bulb went off. He could smell his own BO, and he was super ecstatic. He ran around the house. He got his wife to peel oranges for him so he could smell oranges. And once the effects of the psychedelic wore off, the effects of the magic mushrooms wore off, he retained his sense of smell after one mushroom trip. This is really fantastic. And like I said, this isn't an isolated incident. There are many people that are discussing having the same problem online and that magic mushrooms help them. Although, to be clear, there are also people that say they tried it and it didn't work. And there are also people that tried it and said it took several different psychedelic trips for it to work. So not trying to claim this is a panacea. This isn't a scientific study. This is just an anecdotal story, even if the anecdotal story is true. And there seems to be lots of people that have similar experiences online. So this evidence, though by no means definitive, was strong enough for the PBS here in this piece to reach out to a bunch of scientists to try to figure out what the heck is going on here. Why could magic mushrooms perhaps have cured this guy's sense of smell? And it turns out that we actually still don't know why people even lose their sense of smell when they get this global bug in the first place. We don't know if it's due to damaged neurons. We don't know if it's due to an issue in the nose itself. We don't know if it's due to inflammation. So when we don't know what the problem is, it's pretty hard to guess what it was that solved the problem in the first place. But nevertheless, that didn't stop a bunch of people from putting in their best guesses to what the heck was happening. So one of the guesses is psychedelics has been shown to have neurogenesis, or basically repairing of the neurons. So if this was a neuron problem, then perhaps the psilocybin repaired that. Perhaps if it was an inflammatory problem, then the anti-inflammatory properties of psilocybin took care of that, or if magic mushrooms took care of that. Which, I mean, both of those are very real possibility, and more negative possibility is that it was just dumb luck and he happened to get his sense of smell back as he took mushrooms. I don't know if I necessarily buy that. But then the other interesting opinion on what the heck happened was, again, the placebo effect. He expected to get his sense of smell back by taking magic mushrooms, and then he did. His brain was actually able to override an issue with his body because that's what he wanted it to do. Now look, we don't know exactly why it helped him, but we have enough evidence, or we should have enough evidence, to at least justify a phase 2 clinical trial attempting to figure out what the heck is happening here. We have not only Dustin, but many other people online that say that this helped cure their loss of smell. And we have enough people in our society right now who are battling with this exact same issue. And we've had enough phase 1 safety trials for psilocybin at this point that we should be able to just hop into a phase 2 clinical trial. Yes, I know psilocybin, still Schedule 1. Government, get on that, please. But we should be able to see a phase 2 trial on this, so hopefully we will see one. And basically, I'm just bringing this story to you guys because I thought it was absolutely fascinating from an investor's perspective. The only real important part is perhaps just the sheer scope and scale of the potential for psychedelics to heal. If it can do this, who knows what else it can do. And again, this is still very early. By no means is it confirmed. We would need clinical trials for that, so hopefully we have clinical trials. If you guys enjoyed this episode, let me know down in the comment section what you guys want to see next. I'm thinking about doing an episode on GH Research because, frankly, we've never talked about them before, and they're a massive company with hundreds of millions of dollars in phase 2 clinical trials, so I think we should talk about them. So let me know down in the comments if you want to see a video on that or something else. I always read your comments, and I love when people make it to the end of the video, so put a little fire emoji in your comment if you made it to the end of the video. Alright guys, I love you all. Make sure you smash that like button, hug your mom, don't mix those two things up, subscribe to the channel, and all that other great stuff. I love you all. Peace.